Hi, everyone, and firstly, thank you for watching. My name's Ben Reed, and I'm a 3-times exited founder. I'm joining YouTube today to really spread awareness and help others. Having had a number of startups in the past, I feel now it's time for me to really share knowledge that I've learned over the last 10 years in the direct-to-consumer space. So let me kick off by explaining a little bit of my background, where I am today, what I've done successfully, what I've failed, because I think it's important for those that don't know me to build a picture. One thing to highlight is I've never really been in front of the camera, to be transparent. I've never put my face in front of the brand. Ultimately, the brands that I've built have always either had brand, had celebrity, had influencers, and the last brand had a leading celebrity dentist as the face of the brand. And for me, I'll get on to the reasons why, I guess, maybe not in this video, but in future videos to come, on why I did exactly that. And looking back, I see some fantastic brands out there today, not only building their own brand, but building personal brand on top of that. And it's something that I just, being truthful, I've been a bit hesitant of, a bit imposter syndrome, a bit not wanted to make it all about myself. But I'm now in the next part of my chapter. I've moved my family to Dubai, and I love this space. Do I want to build another brand again after having so many? My answer today is no. The answer may change in the future, but ultimately time will tell with that. I think what I would love to do today is now help others in the space with what I've learned over the years, the mistakes I've made, what I wish I knew earlier. And in doing this type of content, I'm not trying to become a guru. This is not drop shipping. This is not quick cash. This is how I build brands that I've sold, and brands that equally I've closed down because they failed. So let me take it back to the beginning of, I guess, my entrepreneurial days, and this is very cliche because I feel like every entrepreneur has this sort of story, and I think ultimately this story is what drives entrepreneurs forward. And you don't necessarily have to have this element of it to be successful, in my eyes, in business, but I think it certainly helps. And that part, I guess, takes back to being in secondary school and selling Locker Sweets, selling Live Strong wristbands, Ray-Bans, the list goes on. And I think I've always been naturally attracted to earning money, always in a way of selling, I guess, direct to consumer products. So when I first left school, I actually, and still do, have a love for property. So after leaving school, I spent around 3 years in agency in the UK, in a town close to me, then went on to another town and become an assistant manager at a company called Countrywide, one of the largest agents in the UK, largest corporates. And with that, I actually become the youngest assistant manager then, maybe not now, in their Epping branch. And after a couple of years in that, I actually fell into banking. So I spent the next 10 years in investment banking, started my journey there in 2011, 2012. Started with a South African investment bank, Standard Bank. That then was purchased and acquired by a Chinese bank called ICBC. I then went on to Santander on their global markets investment side, and then later went on to Silicon Valley Bank, and I left there in 2021. However, in between all that, I had, I guess, what you call side hustles. So that's really how they started. And the great thing I love about e-commerce space is if you set it up right, if you automate a lot of stuff, if you get third-party logistics, you are able to at least start and focus a good amount of attention, but not take the risk of completely leaving your day-to-day role to effectively start a brand. And to be transparent, I probably advise a lot of people to do that because it's not easy. It can be tough. You don't want to be taking the money out of the business on day one. And I would strongly advise anyone who believes that they're going to take funds out on day one and day one onwards to look at something else, because ultimately brands need cash to fuel. And you could be very lucky, very successful, and start something that does extremely well in a short period of time. It's possible. The last brand that I launched in June 2020 achieved 3.2 million in its first year, 6.9 in its second year, and in its third year I sold it for $30 million. So it's not impossible, but there's foundations to that allowed me to get to that stage. So going back to career, so after banking, during banking, in fact, in 2012, my mum and dad lived in Australia at the time, and I actually visited Australia to see them and have a holiday. And during my time there, I went to have my teeth white. I think I found it on the equivalent of Groupon out there. Sat down in a chair, and they whitened my teeth. In fact, they actually passed me a product to whiten the teeth myself. And I couldn't figure why. I paid a reasonable amount of money, maybe £100, give or take. It wasn't in a dental clinic, it was actually in a salon. And they gave me the product and I had to do it myself. After researching this back in 2012, there wasn't a lot of services offering this within salons. And I wanted to understand why, and I wanted to understand if it's something that I could roll out in the UK. And I did exactly that. So we spent a lot of time looking at the legislation, the law, and trying to understand if it's possible for teeth whitening to be provided by a salon. So after doing all of that, we established that the self-administered part was the reason why, because there's a very grey area in terms of entering a patient's mouth without being an actual dentist. And in 2012, we set up our first in-chair whitening location, a friend of mine's salon in my local area, and that's where my first company, Diamond Whites Teeth Whitening, started. We grew that incredibly well. We had 35 franchises across the UK, one in Ireland and one in Spain, offering in-chair whitening treatments, non-peroxide, self-administered, directly to consumer. The great thing I loved about that model was the fact that you had 35 businesses marketing your product, getting your name out there, and this was prior to knowing anything about ads. Influencers didn't exist. I think influencers for me really started when social media started getting bigger, but not only that, shows like the Anyways FC, which I'll get onto, we've done incredibly well from, Geordie Shore and so on, and now you've got others like Love Island, and then even more value today, you've got real influencers, people that are changing lives in many ways, whether they're fitness coaches or whatever it might be. So we've done incredibly well in that space, but there was still a grey area of whether or not a beautician can offer teeth whitening products in that sort of environment without being a dentist. And it concerned me a little. It concerned me that I didn't know the type of advice that these dentists were giving. Didn't know the type of advice that these beauticians and franchisees were giving and not coming across as dentists. So in around 2014, 2015, I decided to pivot and completely change that model. We stopped selling to all of these franchisees, allowed them to keep their equipment and effectively go off on their own, but not under the umbrella of Diamond Whites. And the reason we done that was we knew that it's important to do things properly. That's how you build brand. again, going back to my point earlier, it's not about short-term cash. It's about building brands that is eventually going to be stocked in the likes of Superdrug and Tesco's, which we were shortly after launching our direct-to-consumer and over-the-counter products, which effectively are home whitening kits, whitening strips, toothpastes, and we were the first to bring some really innovative products to the UK, such as charcoal powder. So completely natural activated charcoal powder was one of our most popular products. We were the first to bring it to the UK. Done incredibly well in sales. And that's what then took us into the likes of Tesco's and Superdrug. So around, I guess around 2016, 2017, we were listed in Superdrug, Tesco's, and it was flying off the shelves. At this time, I was still in banking, but it was doing incredibly well. Now, the problem was it was very, very small average order value. And then when you're selling to a retailer, it's even less. So the frustrating part for me, and I'm going to do hopefully a few videos on different subjects and teach you all everything I've learned. But the frustrating part for me about retail is you're getting squeezed for the margins, especially if you're low average order value. And it's most of the time it's 90-day payment. So whilst things were going well, we had to wait a long time for our money and the margins were not brilliant. And then ultimately, one of the retailers decided to copy the product. Own label, half the price, sat on the shelf next to ours. So you might be going in there to purchase Diamond Whites and then discover you can actually buy the same product for half the price. And our sales declined rapidly to the point where it probably slashed more around 60% in revenue within a few months. So that gave me one huge lesson that I will now forever consider is looking after number one, which is yourself, your business. And I think that's why today the direct-to-consumer space is great. Teeth whitening, I think, is very saturated, but doesn't mean every industry and every product is. But ultimately, looking after yourself and the ability to run ads, which I didn't discover until, I guess, mid to end of being listed in retail. We've done it all organically and through influencers, and touching on what I said earlier, the likes of The Only Way is Essex Cast, Geordie Shore, and now you've got micro-influencers, which are brilliant and probably drive more authentic traffic to your product, especially if they're using it and not just being paid to post about it, which is so important. But sales declined. Sales declined to the point where I didn't know whether to continue. I didn't know whether I still wanted to do this. I didn't know whether I still wanted to effectively pivot again or continue trying to push something that is now very saturated. 101 whitening brands in the space, some big ones, some ones with huge funds, whether they've raised money or just organically done well, or competing with the likes of Colgate and other huge brands. So I knew I needed to change that. I either needed to give up and continue my career in banking, or I needed to change that. And for me, I'd spent too many years trying to make this work, and clearly we were doing something right for selling so much in terms of quantity. Again, low average order value, so it didn't equate to life-changing money, but thousands and hundreds of thousands of units were being sold. So the name was known. The brand was liked, and it's clear that I could sell. And the brand could sell. The infrastructure we put in place, the marketing we put in place, etc. So along that journey, I actually met with a leading celebrity dentist out of the Harley Street area, Dr. Richard Marks. And we always had a relationship in terms of he took our products onto the likes of This Morning and other TV shows. And I knew that we needed to change our offering in one way or another to effectively completely separate ourselves from the crowd, build consumer trust, and no one was offering a product with a doctor in front of it. So we sat down to do exactly that. The first idea was we redeveloped the White Nip products, signed off and formulated by Dr. Richard, and it offers a unique selling point to any other brand in the space. However, whilst doing that, we saw a huge opportunity in the direct-to-consumer orthodontic space. Companies doing extremely well in terms of revenue, but they were missing a huge fundamental part, and that was the clinical part. The part that effectively allowed dentists to see patients in person on the first visit or during their treatment. And what we were able to do was implement AI to monitor our patients from home, so we reduced the number of visits. So that saves us money, but pass convenience onto the patient, and we also pass those savings onto the patient. So in some cases, we were up to 70% cheaper than your local clinic. More convenient, and again, direct to consumer, but we called it a hybrid model because you have both. And from going for good amount of revenue, good amount of sales, to almost nothing and giving it up, I decided to pivot again. And I'll get on to pivoting part, I guess, in another video. But ultimately, we decided to launch Diamond Whites Aligners. Diamond Whites Aligners was launched in June 2020. And from zero, in our first year, we've achieved 3.2 million in revenue. In our second year, we launched Nighttime Aligners, and we managed to achieve 6.9 million in revenue. And then in year 3, we managed to sell the business for $30 million. So that's one journey I've had with Diamond Whites. Now, I've also had some other startups that I'll probably get into in another video. One I sold back in a management buyout, and the other I sold again for an all-cash purchase. So for me, I've learned a lot. My CV's diverse, and it's quite unique in a way of having 10 years in banking in the financial services industry, but also 10 years in direct-to-consumer. And I love this space and want to now help others in it. So for me, doing that, I want to do it in a way that's accessible. It's something that you can ultimately learn from my videos, but you can also book one-to-one strategy calls with me in a different level depending on the time you need. So I'm going to put some more details out on how you book that call and get started. And hopefully we can dive into my story a little bit more, how I managed to raise capital, which I've raised around 2 million from VCs to date, how I sold the business, how I started the other businesses and this business, and hopefully give you the A to Z on how to start your own or improve your own, whether that's scale, reduce costs, drive efficiency through automation. There's many ways and many different angles that you can improve. And I think sometimes when you're in that rat race and you've got those blinkers on, you sometimes forget the basics, or it takes a few years to learn them. Some of the stuff I know now, I didn't know 5 years yet. So if you got to this point, firstly, thank you for watching. I'll certainly be doing more, and I'll be providing more details on how you can book below a call with me, and some more details on the course to learn more on how to start, scale, grow, sell, fundraise, and the list goes on. Thank you.